Whispers in the woods. It was a crisp autumn morning when a group of friends gathered at a local cafe to discuss their upcoming trekking trip. The leaves were turning shades of orange and gold, and the air was filled with the promise of adventure. There were 5 of them: Jake, the enthusiastic planner; Sarah, the cautious one; Mark, the jokester; Emily, the nature lover; and Tom, the quiet observer. "Guys, we should totally hit the Pine Ridge Trail this weekend," Jake exclaimed, his eyes sparkling with excitement. "It's supposed to be beautiful this time of year." "I don't know, Jake," Sarah replied, stirring her coffee. "I've heard some weird stories about that place. People say it's haunted." "Haunted? Come on, Sarah. It's just a bunch of old legends," Mark scoffed, rolling his eyes. "What's a little ghost story among friends?" Emily chimed in. "I've read about the history of Pine Ridge. There were some strange disappearances in the past, but it's probably just urban legends." "Exactly. We'll be fine," Jake insisted. "Let's just go and have fun. We can handle a few spooky stories." After some back and forth, the group finally agreed. They packed their gear, excited for the adventure ahead, unaware of the darkness that awaited them in the woods. The following Saturday, they set off early in the morning, the sun barely peeking over the horizon. The drive to Pine Ridge was filled with laughter and music, the friends sharing stories and teasing one another. As they arrived at the trailhead, the atmosphere shifted. The towering trees loomed overhead, their branches swaying gently in the breeze, casting eerie shadows on the ground. "Okay, let's stick together," Sarah said, her voice slightly shaky. "I don't want anyone getting lost." "Relax, Sarah. It's just a hike," Mark teased, nudging her playfully. They began their trek, the sound of crunching leaves beneath their boots echoing in the stillness. The trail wound deeper into the forest, and the vibrant colors of autumn surrounded them. As they walked, they shared stories, laughter, and the occasional ghost tale, but Sarah's unease lingered. "Did you guys hear about the hiker who went missing last year?" she asked, glancing nervously at the trees. "Stop it, Sarah. You're ruining the mood," Mark said, rolling his eyes again. But as they continued, the atmosphere grew heavier. The sunlight filtered through the leaves, creating a patchwork of light and shadow on the ground. The deeper they went, the more isolated they felt, as if the forest was closing in around them. After several hours of hiking, they found a clearing perfect for camping. They set up their tents, gathered firewood, and soon a warm fire crackled in the center of their campsite. The group settled around the fire, roasting marshmallows and sharing stories. As night fell, the forest transformed. The sounds of the day faded, replaced by the rustling of leaves and distant animal calls. The fire flickered, casting dancing shadows on their faces. "Okay, who's got a scary story?" Jake asked, grinning. "I'll go first," Mark said, leaning closer to the fire. "So, there's this legend about Pine Ridge. They say a group of hikers disappeared years ago, and their spirits still wander the woods searching for a way home." "Very original, Mark," Sarah said sarcastically, but a hint of fear crept into her voice. "Seriously, though," Mark continued, "they say if you listen closely, you can hear their whispers in the wind." "Stop it," Emily exclaimed, her eyes wide. "You're scaring me." "Relax, it's just a story," Jake said, trying to lighten. "Relax, it's just a story," Jake said, trying to lighten the mood. "We're all here today. Nothing's gonna happen." But as the night wore on, an unsettling feeling settled over the group. The wind picked up, rustling the leaves, and the shadows seemed to stretch longer. They decided to turn in for the night, each retreating to their tents. In the middle of the night, Jake was jolted awake by a strange sound. It was a soft whispering, barely audible, but it sent chills down his spine. He sat up, straining to hear. The whisper seemed to come from outside his tent, weaving through the trees like a ghostly melody. "Guys!" he called softly, but there was no response. He unzipped the tent and peeked outside. The fire had died down to embers, casting a dim glow. The forest was eerily quiet, the only sound the rustling of leaves. "Hello?" he whispered, stepping out of the tent. The air was cold, and a shiver ran down his spine. He glanced around, but the darkness swallowed everything. Suddenly, he heard it again. The whispering, clearer this time. It sounded like a voice calling his name. "Jake! Jake!" His heart raced. "Is someone there?" he called out, but the only response was the rustling of leaves. He turned to head back to his tent when he noticed something moving in the shadows. A figure stood at the edge of the clearing just beyond the trees. "Who's there?" It looked like Tom, but something was off. His eyes were vacant, and his expression was eerily calm. "Tom?" Jake asked, confused. "What are you doing out here?" But Tom didn't respond. Instead, he just stood there, staring at Jake with an unsettling smile. "Tom?" Jake repeated, taking a step back. "This isn't funny." Suddenly, the whispers grew louder, swirling around him like a storm. "Jake, come play with us!" Panic surged through him. He turned and ran back to his tent, heart pounding. "Which we off." He crawled inside, zipping the flaps shut, and tried to calm his racing heart. The next morning, Jake woke to the sound of laughter. He unzipped his tent, squinting against the bright sunlight. The others were gathered around the fire, chatting and eating breakfast. "Hey, sleepyhead," Mark called, grinning. "He was up late last night." "Yeah, he was acting weird," Jake said, trying to shake off the memory of the figure he'd seen. "Did anyone hear those whispers last night?" "Whispers?" Sarah asked, raising an eyebrow. "What are you talking about?" "I swear I heard someone calling my name," Jake insisted, "and then I saw Tom out by the trees." "Tom?" "He was in his tent the whole time," Mark said, looking puzzled. "You must have been dreaming." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. "No, I wasn't dreaming. I saw him." Okay, let's not freak out," Emily said, trying to diffuse the tension. "Maybe it was just the wind or something." They finished breakfast and decided to explore the area. As they hiked deeper into the woods, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The trees seemed to close in around them, and the whispers from the night before echoed in his mind. As the day wore on, Tom's behavior became increasingly strange. He was quiet, almost withdrawn, and he kept glancing over his shoulder as if he were being watched. The others noticed too, exchanging worried glances. "Are you okay, Tom?" Sarah asked during lunch. "You seem a bit off." "I'm fine," he replied, but his voice lacked conviction. "Just tired, I guess." That evening they gathered around the fire again, but the atmosphere was tense. Tom sat apart from the group, staring into the flames with an unsettling intensity. The others tried to engage him in conversation, but he barely responded. "Hey, Tom, want to tell us a ghost story?" Mark joked, trying to lighten the mood. But Tom just shook his head, his eyes still fixed on the fire. "I don't want to talk about it." "Talk about what?" Jake pressed, feeling a knot form in his stomach. "Just things," Tom muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. As the night deepened, the whispers returned, swirling around them like a chilling breeze. Jake felt a sense of dread wash over him. He glanced at Tom, who seemed to be in a trance, his expression vacant. "Tom!" Jake called, but Tom didn't respond. Instead, he stood up abruptly and walked toward the trees, disappearing into the darkness. "Where's he going?" Emily asked, her voice trembling. "I don't know," Jake replied, feeling a surge of panic. "We should go after him." They followed Tom's path into the woods, the darkness closing in around them. The whispers grew louder, echoing through the trees. "Tom! Tom! Tom!" Jake shouted, but there was no response. The forest felt alive. the shadows shifting and twisting as they searched for their friend. After what felt like hours of searching, they finally found Tom standing in a small clearing, staring blankly at something in the distance. The air was thick with tension, and the whispers intensified, swirling around them like a storm. Jake called, rushing forward. "What are you doing?" Tom turned slowly, his eyes wide and unseeing. "They're here," he said, his voice hollow. "They want us to join them." "Join who?" Sarah asked, fear creeping into her voice. "The ones who disappeared," Tom replied, his expression eerily calm. "They're waiting for us." Suddenly, the whispers grew deafening, filling the air with a cacophony of voices. "Join us! Join us! Join us!" Jake felt a chill run down his spine. "We need to get out of here," he said urgently, grabbing Tom's arm. "Now!" "But—" Tom pulled away, his gaze fixed on something behind them. "No! They're here!" The others turned, and what they saw sent a wave of terror crashing over them. Figures emerged from the shadows, their faces pale and hollow, eyes void of life. They looked like lost souls, wandering the woods, searching for something they could never find. "Help us," one of them whispered, reaching out a skeletal hand. "Run!" Jake shouted, grabbing Emily and Sarah's hand. "Run!" Jake shouted, grabbing Emily and Sarah's hands. They turned and sprinted back through the trees, the whispers chasing them, echoing in their ears. They ran blindly through the forest, branches scratching at their skin, the darkness closing in around them. The whispers grew louder, a haunting chorus urging them to stop, to turn back. "Tom!" Jake shouted, but there was no response. He glanced back, but Tom was nowhere to be seen. "Keep going!" Sarah cried, her voice filled with panic. "We can't stop!" They burst into a clearing, gasping for breath, but the whispers followed them, swirling around like a storm. The figures loomed in the shadows, their hollow eyes watching, waiting. "Where's Tom?" Emily asked, her voice trembling. "I don't know," Jake replied, fear gripping his heart. "We have to find him." "Join us! Join us!" Suddenly, the ground beneath them trembled, and the trees swayed as if alive. The figures moved closer, their hands reaching out, beckoning them to come forward. "Run!" Jake shouted again, and they turned, sprinting back toward the trail. They finally reached the trailhead, breathless and terrified. The sun was beginning to rise, casting a pale light over the forest. But as they looked back, the whispers faded, and the figures disappeared into the shadows. "Where's Tom?" Sarah gasped, panic rising in her chest. "I don't know," Jake said, his heart racing. "We have to go back for him." "No, we can't go back in there," Emily cried, tears streaming down her face. "He's gone." "We can't leave him," Jake insisted, but deep down he felt the weight of despair settling in. "Tom!" Jake shouted, his voice echoing through the trees. "Tom!" But there was no response. Days turned into weeks, and the group returned to their normal lives, but the memory of that night haunted them. They reported Tom's disappearance to the authorities, but search efforts yielded nothing. The forest had swallowed him whole, leaving only questions in its wake. Jake often found himself staring into the woods, wondering what had happened to his friend. The whispers still echoed in his mind, a haunting reminder of the darkness that lurked just beyond the trees. From that day, I still remain thinking about it. The whispers, the figures, and the chilling realization that some places hold secrets too dark to uncover. The forest had taken Tom, and with him, a piece of their friendship that could never be replaced. As the seasons changed, the group drifted apart, each carrying the weight of that night in their hearts. They would occasionally meet, but the laughter was gone, replaced by an unspoken understanding of the darkness that lurked in the woods. And every time Jake passed by the edge of the forest, he could swear he heard the whispers calling his name, beckoning him to return, to join the lost souls wandering the shadows. Years later, Jake found himself back at the edge of Pine Ridge, the memories flooding back. He stood there staring into the darkness, feeling the weight of the past pressing down on him. The whispers were faint but still present, a reminder of what he had lost. He took a deep breath, stepping closer to the trees, feeling the pull of the unknown. "Tom?" he called softly, hoping for a response. But the only answer was the rustling of leaves, the whispers swirling around him like a ghostly embrace. From that day, I still remain thinking about it. The darkness, the whispers, and the haunting question of whether Tom was truly gone or if he was still out there waiting for his friends to join him in the shadows. Thanks for watching. The veil between our world and theirs is thinner than you think. Each like, each share, each subscription strengthens the connection. Feed the channel before it feeds on you.